but I'll go ahead and say welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're happy to have you all here to learn more about Save the Sounds policy work in New York, up in Albany. Today we have David Ansel and Ella McGrail with us. David Ansel is our Vice President of the Center for Water Protection. Almost 5 years ago, David retired from his impressive career in corporate law to return to his primary interest, environmental law, protection, and policy. And we're so glad to have him here, um, leading our Center for Water Protection. Ella McGrail is our New York policy coordinator. Ella works in Albany to support legislation that protects clean water, addresses climate change, and safeguards Long Island Sound and the lands that surround it. So today they're going to share with you what we're focusing on right now in the 2026 session, ways you can get involved and why it matters. And with that, I'll turn it over to David.
All right, thank you, Anne. And thanks for everyone who's joining. I think we still have a few people coming in late, but just so you know, this is being recorded and so will be shared out afterwards. Um, so as Anne said, my name is David Ansel. Um, I'm the Vice President of Water Protection at Save the Sound, which is related to my job overseeing our water protection programs. But I'm also the point person for policy at the organization for the state of New York. We have policy work happening in Hartford, New York, and Washington, D.C., related to our mission of protecting and restoring the Long Island Sound. For those of you who may not be members, we work in a bi-state capacity and have a number of programs, including water protection, water monitoring, ecological restoration. We do legal work as well as our government affairs and policy work. So today we're going to be focusing specifically on New York State policy work. And Ella McGrail and I will be doing this. We have some slides to go through with you. And we'll definitely have time for Q&A at the end. So please hold your questions until we get through the slides. And so you know who I am. You should also meet Ella. So Ella, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Ella McGrail. You heard my bio from Anne, and I am based up here in Albany, saving the sound as best I can from a bit of a distance, but in the halls of power up here.
That's right. So Ella and I are a close-knit team working very hand in glove in Albany. As you heard, Ella's lives in Albany and got a graduate degree there, and I spend between 1 and 3 days a week during session up there. Um, so Ella, do you want to talk a little bit about? Want to go to the next slide, and then we'll talk a little bit about the team, the rest of the team.
Yes, yes. So I chose this particular graphic because it does feel like we are fighting to save the world through the Saving the Sound. And I've chosen, like, really, there are a lot of people that help us with our New York policy work. But people probably doing the most direct work are me, David Ansel. We've already described our roles, but also Allison Regilla, our New York associate soundkeeper, and she's out on the boat doing the water monitoring, and then also she is going to be she has helped us already with responding to regulations and forming our policy positions, and she's going to be up in Albany more and more, helping us to advocate. And then David Abreu, in part of his role and he's a Hawkeye back here, his part of his role as the clean water specialist is he's also our point person for New York City policy. So he's been also helping out with Westchester policy. He's just going wherever we need him. Very, very helpful. And then David Siegerman is our New York communications specialist. So he is helping with all our social media, all the action alerts that you get from us, That is, and our biweekly policy email updates. That's all David Seegerman. But the captain, the leader, the most important member of the team is you. So we can't do any of what we do without our members, because the reason me and David and Allison, when we go up to talk to politicians in Albany, the reason they want to listen to us is because they know we represent multiple other people, hundreds of other people who care about Long Island Sound and are very invested in the health of the ecosystem and in the environment as a whole. So you are the captain of our team, our membership.
Thank you. So, New York State, just to give you a little context, um, has sort of the classic, like what you learned in eighth grade civics, the legislative branch and the executive branch. So we have the New York State Assembly, which is similar, analogous to the federal House of Representatives, and then the New York State Senate, and and then of course the executive branch with the governor. So we are very busy engaging with assembly members, senators, and the governor's office during session. What the way the session works is in January, the session calendar comes out, and session begins usually the first or second week in January and goes until the middle of June. It can get extended. And then during that time period, anywhere from 2 to 4 days a week are session days when the legislators are supposed to be there working on passing legislation. So those are the days that we focus on. There's also hearings and committee meetings and a lot of other opportunities to interface with the politicians during those days. And so I typically, because I live in Westchester County, I typically go up on Mondays and come back on Tuesday night or Wednesday. But it's been really effective for Save the Sound in terms of our ability to get a lot of work done, to have Ella, who lives in Albany and can just regularly go over to the building and work with people and go to meetings when I can't be there. So with that, let's go to the next slide, Ella, please.
Well, I do want to add, you might think that it's a pretty sweet deal for these legislators that they only have to work half the week for half the year, but they do have quite a bit of other things going on, from events and meetings and going around their district to do various things, constituent services. So it can be rather difficult to get their attention. But I promise that your tax dollars are not paying them to only work for about a quarter of the time.
Okay, so obviously our goal is to have an environmental impact on policy in the state of New York, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we move forward. But how do we do it? What are the strategies and tactics that we engage with? So primarily it's kind of twofold. One is engaging the public generally to make sure that our members and non-members and the public understand what's going on with the water quality and the other environmental issues that are affecting the sound in the region. And then also communicating that to those who are making the laws in Albany, so that they understand that. We, of course, have a really strong science team. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of science and other experts and legal experts on our team. So the politicians really do view us as experts on the topics of water quality and resilience and habitat and all the other things that are related to our mission. So they do take us seriously. They take our meetings and they listen to what we have to say. We work with them on specific pieces of legislation. We help draft legislation. We give science and technical support on legislation. We do a lot of this work through partners and other NGO partners, and we work in coalitions broadly, which amplifies and helps get the politicians' attention so that they understand that there are a lot of people in the state of New York who care about these issues. We've been invited to testify in hearings about horseshoe crabs. We are regularly invited to come testify on the budget for the Environmental Conservation sections of the and policies of the New York State budget. And as Ella has put on here, we also manage to eat a lot of pizza and pasta in Albany, and we make sure that our other NGO partners are getting their fair share on the late nights when we're trying to pass legislation in the assembly. So
You
that's
don't
just a
need
quick
fossil
overview.
fuel. You
Some of
don't
these
need fossil fuel
pictures,
when you can carbo fuel, just saying.
that's right. And some of these pictures just show, Ella testifying. On the bottom, there's a group of people there for what's called a lobby day in Albany, where we get a large group of people in coalitions to sign up to come and go meet with different legislators about a specific policy or a specific budget item or a specific bill. On the bottom right, I'm testifying at the Environmental Conservation Budget hearing, which happens once a year in January or February. And we also try to take advantage of meeting with politicians in the district. So we take politicians out on the boat, and Allison and Regilla has taken us out with a bunch of politicians to really take them out so they can see their districts from the water and understand the water quality challenges that we're facing and the resiliency challenges that we're facing. And it has a big impression on them when they understand all the science and the water quality challenges and the policies that we can work on to help improve those. Next, Ella. So let's talk a little bit specifically about this year's budget process and negotiation. We are currently in budget season. The governor announced on her State of the State address her intentions on January 13th, and then the following week put out her draft budget. And so as it relates to the things that are most important to us, these are the numbers that we're lobbying for. So again, just to understand, our mission and our vision, we are concerned about wastewater pollution in the Sound. We are concerned about stormwater pollution in the Sound. We are concerned about climate change, which exacerbates wastewater pollution and stormwater pollution by overwhelming those infrastructure systems. It also warms the water, which makes the water unable to hold oxygen as well, which is bad for the Sound, bad for habitat. And so, like most things, the solutions, we know what the solutions are. And like most things, they cost money. And so we work very hard to try to make sure that certain programs in the state get properly funded. So the first big item in the state is the Clean Water Infrastructure Act. So this program's been around since 2017 and is typically funded at $500 million a year. And as the name implies, it's money for wastewater infrastructure, upgrades and improvements, stormwater upgrades and improvements, including green infrastructure, which is so important, and a whole host of other drinking water and other water related infrastructure needs. What's amazing about this program is that sounds like an incredible amount of money, and it has been billions of dollars, over $5 billion since 2017. But the reality is that in the state of New York, if you include wastewater and stormwater infrastructure needs together with various drinking water needs, which of course relate to the Sound as well, our tributaries and our lakes, etc. It's estimated that there's a $90 billion infrastructure need in the state of New York. And so we are chipping away at this incrementally year after year. And you can see that this year we're asking for 700 million instead of 500 million for a host of reasons, which you can follow up with me afterwards because some of it's quite nuanced, but not the least of which is inflation. And also the governor is really pushing to spend some of this money on new development. But we know that we already have an existing infrastructure challenge that greatly exceeds the amount of money. And we know that this program is oversubscribed every year. There are more people asking for money for projects in the state of New York than can be funded. The Environmental Protection Fund, another really important environmental program in the state of New York, which includes money for open space, farmland protection, but also wastewater infrastructure and stormwater infrastructure. We also always ask in the budget every year to make sure that the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Department of Health, and the Environmental Facilities Corporation are adequately funded because those programs are so critical to executing on protecting the environment in the state of New York. And there never seems to be enough resources and staff at these agencies to do the things that they need to do. The EFC is particularly interesting because their job is to actually take the grant requests and execute on distributing the funds that we obtain through the budget process out to the communities, the municipalities, the NGOs, the counties, all around, in our case, the Long Island Sound, to make sure these projects are getting done. Two other ones I'll mention quickly, the Sustainable Future Program. We've been lobbying the governor for some time to put a cap and trade system. I think in New York they call it cap and invest to try to reduce carbon and raise billions of dollars in the state to push for more renewable energy in the state. She has been unwilling to do that, but last year announced a 1 billion sustainable future program to do various electrification and renewable energy related projects. So we, together with all of our NGO partners in Albany, are asking her to do that again because we think that needs to continue to be a priority to improve the environment in the state of New York. Last but not least, a major topic in Albany that the governor put in her budget, because she sometimes does put policy items in her budget as a way to force policies that she's promoting into the budget because she tends to have the upper hand in the budget negotiation. So this is a very important law in the state of New York that requires when folks do development work in the state of New York that they have to get an environmental impact statement that's publicly available and can be reviewed to make sure that people are not moving forward on projects that are going to be harmful to the environment. She's looking to significantly cut back on those requirements because her number one priority is housing and development in the state of New York. So we're currently reviewing this. Our legal team is reviewing this. One of the big issues I think we have is that it doesn't have any guardrails around it in terms of what that means. And also, we were told that any changes would have to do with affordable housing, and that was not included. It just seems to be sort of a pro-development desire to remove bureaucratic red tape, as the governor has called it, although she wasn't quite that kind. Anyway, Ella, you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, just because all these funds, as important as they are, they can feel really abstract. But these are just a couple of examples of how money from the Clean Water Infrastructure Act and the Environmental Protection Fund have directly benefited our watershed. So just a couple of examples. In 2022, the Village of Northport got this grant for green infrastructure and doing a bunch of rain gardens. The Bronx has a lot of issues with combined sewer overflows, just a lot of untreated sewage getting into the Bronx, getting into the waterways that then flow into the Sound. So they got 15 million from these funds to deal with that and prevent a lot of that pollution. And then wetland restoration for the Blind Brook. Our Friends of Rye Nature Center got this grant this year to do that. And then we got the Save the Sound also received a grant from one of these programs for dam removal on the Bronx River. And we love to remove dams here at Save the Sound because that restores upstream habitat and allows fish and other organisms to move freely through these waterways, which is a lot better for them and for the environment. And actually makes the communities where they are a lot more flood resilient because dams can be a serious flooding hazard. So these are just a couple of ways that this money is making water quality better in the Long Island Sound and just making life a little better for communities in our watershed.
All right, Ella, you want to talk a little bit about some of these key pieces of legislation that we're working on in Albany this year?
Sure, and I want to shout out David Ansel for this very excellent and dramatic picture of the Capitol that he snapped last year. Really adds gravitas to whatever slide it is on. So we work on a lot of different bills in Albany, and David had mentioned our coalition work. We support uh, bills really in partnership with our other coalition members. And some of the top priorities that we have highlighted for this year are the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. And this is because we're seeing the very extensive plastic pollution, in particular in Long Island Sound. And this bill would require large producers of packaging to cut their single-use packaging by 30% over 12 years. And also bans certain toxic chemicals from certain known toxic chemicals from packaging that we currently allowed to be in food packaging that we don't think should be in there because it's hazardous to human health and also to the environment once that packaging unfortunately ends up in landfills and on our beaches and in the water. So that's one very, very big priority for us. And then the Climate Resilient New York Act would create a Office of of Resiliency for New York State, and that this we think would just help the state organize its response to extreme weather and to the increasing impacts of climate change that we are already seeing. We want communities to have clear resources and support when they're facing a climate emergency. And if there were a dedicated Office of Resiliency in New York, we think that would be a really effective way to deal with that. And also, when it comes to resiliency, Rain Ready New York is a priority for us. And this one is pretty simple. It would add stormwater to the definition of sewage for the purposes of certain water authorities. And that would basically just make it so we can regulate stormwater in New York the same way we regulate wastewater or drinking water. It's very clear that as our flooding crises get more and more frequent and more intense, we need to be able to regulate stormwater, and that's what this bill would allow us to do. And then we have a suite of bills to regulate PFAS. And if you don't know what PFAS is, they are perfluoroalkyl chemicals. I probably butchered that pronunciation because there's a bunch of consonants next to each other. But basically, they're better known as forever chemicals because they really don't break down in the natural world and they cause a really disturbing suite of health impacts, including kidney and testicular cancer, immune system dysfunction, development dysfunction, birth defects. And they also cause this in human beings, but also in wildlife and sea creatures. So this is a problem for people and aquatic ecosystems. So we are supporting two bills to get PFAS out of common products because that would prevent these chemicals from just getting into the environment and getting into our bodies and the economy and all that in the first place. And then the PFAS Discharge Disclosure Act would make facilities that are basically at high risk of discharging PFAS test for PFAS so that we know where these chemicals are entering the environment.
Thank you, Ella. So before we leave this slide, I just wanted to give a little color and context to how we choose these bills. There are, hundreds and hundreds of bills to choose from in Albany that different sponsors, different offices are putting out, as well as the fact that we could propose legislation by ourselves or with coalition partners, and the governor puts out legislation and policy. So we really always think back to our mission. So you heard my conversation about the budget is really our budget asks are guided by our major pollution challenges that we see affecting the sound, wastewater pollution, stormwater pollution, climate change, dealing with resiliency issues. So these choices on these bills, first of all, our other coalition partners, we all sort of loosely agree on what our top priorities are, but these also really fit directly within our mission and what we do at Save the Sound and what we care about. These are, the packaging reduction bill is about removing waste and chemicals and toxins from our communities. And since we're very much a water organization in many ways, all these plastics break down and become microplastics, and they're in our bodies, and they're in our drinking water, and they're in our tributaries, and they're in the sound, and they're in our fish. This is a really important, interesting bill. It was actually the third most heavily lobbied bill in Albany last session. Millions of dollars. Lobbyists were flown in from DC and came up from New York City. The unions came in to oppose the bill. And so you're talking about people like Pepsi and Coke and very large food packaging corporations, the plastics industry, the chemical industry. They have tremendous resources. Notwithstanding that, we've gotten it through the Senate twice, and we were very close to getting it through the Assembly in June. Ella and I were pretty much camped out late nights at the Assembly, talking to legislators and pulling them off the floor, trying to get this one done. So we're really hopeful that this June, when we do that, we're going to be able to see this happen. The bottom line is we have a waste crisis in New York. There's no more landfill space. We don't want to be burning it in incinerators. The best solution is just less waste. And similar to that with PFAS, which is a contaminant, it's really become ubiquitous and people are getting sick all over the state. We're finding more and more communities that are affected. And so the idea is to turn it off at the tap. And this Save the Sound was very much involved in Hartford in passing a PFAS and household products bill last year. And so we want to complete that by having it done in both states for the protection of our community and our region. So just a little more information about some of the bills. If you have more questions or interested in any of these bills, please feel free to reach out to Ella and I after. Wanted to talk about some of the successes. You can become very cynical about policy and politics and how the process works. What I would say is it does require a tremendous amount of planning and effort. Democracy is not easy, but you can have an impact. And we at Save the Sound have, over the last few years, been part of some really good, successful policy accomplishments. And so I just wanted to share those with you. One is last session, we were able to protect horseshoe crabs, whose population are in very steep decline. Not just because we love horseshoe crabs, which we do, but because this animal, which has been around for hundreds of millions of years, produces eggs at a very high volume, which are vital to the eco web in the Long Island Sound and elsewhere. But without those eggs and without this animal, we would lose a whole host of finfish, including striped bass and a number of rare birds who come to the Long Island Sound region. So very important animal for the eco web. And again, it's an example of our bi-state approach where Bill Lucy and our team in Hartford were able to do that 2 years ago. And so we made it a priority in New York so that we could protect all of the Long Island Sound and not just half of the Long Island Sound, because of course the animals swim back and forth and don't know the difference. We also worked on something called Prop 2 out in Suffolk County. And it was a combination of working in Suffolk County at the legislature and also in Albany and getting the governor to sign a rule which allowed the voters in Suffolk County to go to the ballot box and vote to increase their sales tax by 1/8 of a penny in Suffolk County alone, and take that money and use it specifically to upgrade wastewater facilities and septics in Suffolk County. We know that wastewater is a problem around the entire Sound, but the issues are slightly different in each place. In Suffolk County, the challenge in large part is the fact that there's 380,000 outdated septic systems and cesspools which need to be upgraded. So this is creating funding to help do that in addition to other grants that are available in the state. And it's only been in effect for about 8 or 9 months, and they've already raised about $44 million in Suffolk County. So I know they're confident that once it becomes summer beach season and all the second homeowners and the tourists come, they're going to be able to raise a lot of money. So we're really encouraged about that. And we worked very hard on the campaign, both in the county and in Albany. And do we have another one on here, Ella, or are those the two?
Living shorelines. Did I
Oh yeah,
skip
and
that?
living shorelines was a bill, a resiliency bill, which is also a habitat bill that Save the Sound had been working on before I even got here. But during my first session a few years ago, um, was able to work with Assemblyman Otis and Senator Shelley Mayer here in Westchester, and we got a bill signed so that the Department of Environmental Conservation is required to consider nature-based solutions whenever they're giving permits for development on the shoreline. So this is really great because we would much rather have nature-based solutions and restoring wetlands and using invasive species, I mean, not invasive species and oyster reefs and other natural solutions for resiliency on the coastline as versus hardened surfaces. So
And
just go ahead, Al.
the last thing I'd highlight as a big success that we had over the last couple of years is the Environmental Protection Fund, which we mentioned before, had been funded at 400 million for several years, stagnant funding. And stagnant funding, as we're all very intimately aware, very we all know what inflation is these days for sure. So if your fund is not getting raised every year, that's like it's getting cut. So we were able to, along with our coalition partners, get that appropriation for the EPF raised from 400 to 425 million. So that was another big success.
Thank you, Ella. So have at it, Ella. You
All
get
right.
this slide.
So I think we've been talking a lot about ourselves and our work. Let's get back to the fact that our membership and the people who support Save the Sound and support the Long Island Sound are really the critical engine behind everything we do. So you've probably, there are a couple of really critical things that you can do to get involved in our policy work. One of them is to engage with our action alerts. So you probably have seen these emails in your inbox before. Our excellent communications lead, David Siegerman, puts those together along with me and David Ansel. And basically what they are is just a request for you to reach out to your representatives about a given piece of legislation or budget appropriation, expressing support or asking them not to support it. And we write the message out for you. We just ask you to go through and click a couple of buttons. And I have spoken to legislative staffers about whether they actually read these pre-written messages, and they say they do. Actually, they keep track of how many constituents are reaching out to a legislator about a given issue. So these really do matter. So that's a really important thing you can do. We will occasionally host policy workshops. I don't know if any of you attended the horseshoe crab bill workshop that we gave a couple of months ago, where I will just talk through the specifics of a particular policy and answer questions, and then walk you through the process of reaching out to your legislator to do a personalized communication. Because while the action alerts certainly do matter, it is even more impactful when a constituent reaches out and just gives their own thoughts and their own opinion on a bill. So joining the policy workshops would be a super valuable thing to do. Spreading the word, letting your friends and family and community members know that there's an organization that's defending Long Island Sound and the waters and environment around it. And, letting them know how fun and awesome we are and how many Avengers memes we do, and how they should totally join us and get involved in our work. Staying informed. I know that I didn't really know much about my state legislators before it became my job to know about it. But now that it is my job to know about it, it is very clear to me that state policy, particularly in New York, is extremely, extremely impactful. So staying informed on what is going on at the state level, and where pressure points are needed, where important policies are needing support, it really matters. And we will try to help you with that as best we can by sending out our bi-weekly newsletters about giving you an update on what's been happening with the policies that we are supporting in New York each twice a month. We'll send that out. And communicating with your elected officials, we kind of we already touched on that, but just any way that you can reach out or communicate or form a relationship with your state officials is really important. And lobby days. So we mentioned that that's a big part of what we do along with our coalition partners is we try to get people, not just advocates like us, but people who are just not paid to do this, just everyday folks who care about these issues, to come up to Albany and meet with legislators and talk to them about why a given issue matters to them. And that's that lobby days are not about making people policy experts. You don't have to know everything about a policy to come do a lobby day. In fact, you can really just know the basic idea because the important thing about having constituents at a lobby day is letting legislators know why the issue matters to their constituents. Like, why does it matter to you that there's less plastic pollution? Why does it matter to you that we phase out PFAS? Why does it matter that we invest in transitioning off of fossil fuels? All of that. So if you can join us for a lobby day, we'll also be putting messages about when those are coming up in our biweekly updates. And the next one that would be a good one to participate in is on Earth Day. We are teaming up with a bunch of other environmental groups all across the state to get people who care about the environment and that the all the all the many implications that a healthy environment have for the rest of our wellness to come up and talk about that and push for that on April 22nd. So it is a bit of a hike for some people, but I can personally guarantee that David Ansel will buy you Italian food if you come up and join us for a lobby day.
Thank you, Ella. Yeah, those the lobby days are a fascinating experience and a really good way to get involved. There are a lot of people, we organize and put together buses or vans or meet at the train station and caravan up, and you get there, and usually some folks like Ella and I, working with others, will get you settled and get you the materials so that you can read about the talking points on the legislation or the budget item that we're working on. And then you go off with a team of people and you have a series of meetings in different legislative offices around the Capitol. Um, so it's a really interesting way to learn about the policies. And you go sit with the elected officials. Lots of times you're meeting with their staff because the elected officials are actually in the Senate or in the Assembly, um, debating bills or working on passing legislation. But there are lots of opportunities to meet with the elected officials when you're up there. And it's amazing, a lot of the decisions and a lot of the conversations get made like walking through the hall. You bump into a state senator, you'll bump into an assembly member that you've been working on, or their legislative director, and you can end up having a really substantive conversation waiting for the elevator or something. And in some ways, Ella and I joke, it feels like a really big high school up there. But the more you're there, people start to know your face and you start to get to know people and you develop relationships. It's a people business, just like any other business. And you get to know the staff and the offices, and they take your phone calls and they invite you to important things like the Westchester County Environmental Roundtable or the Suffolk County Roundtable or other opportunities to testify at committee meetings and things of that nature. So having a physical presence is really important, and that's the same for you all. If you take the time to go to the district offices of your assembly members and state senators, and or come up to Albany and meet with them, it is impactful, and they care about every single voter. And many of them work extremely hard. Most of them do, as far as I can tell. So that's our presentation. Thank you all very, very much. Hopefully that was coherent enough for you and that you felt like you learned something, but we certainly have time for Q&A. So please feel free to ask questions. Give everyone a minute, see if there are any. I don't see
Yeah,
any.
David and Ella, I have a question. If I think you touched on this, but do you find that it's more impactful to say call your assembly member versus writing an email? And how much does customizing the message or sending your own email versus sending it through our action alert, how much does all that matter? And is it better to give a call or write a physical letter? Do you see any difference in the impact?
I have not gotten from the communication that I have done with legislative offices, I don't think that calling versus emailing is either one is particularly more impactful than another, but I do would say that a personalized message catches the eye more than a form message. Again, not that the form messages don't matter, but I think it's definitely it does stick with people more when the constituent has taken the time to write a personalized message.
Yeah, and I do think also, and they count these, and it's weird because now we live in a digital world. When I was much younger, I worked in a congressman's office, and people had to sit down and handwrite a letter and put it in snail mail, and so those were counted, and that took some effort. But driving to Albany and going into your representative's office, that shows real effort, and that is meaningful to them. I see that Nancy Seligson has a question. Nancy?
Hi, thanks, guys. That was really helpful. I have one request and two questions.
Okay.
The request is if in your biweekly newsletters that you once a month that you give kind of a one sentence update on all these bills, because I think it would keep us more engaged on a regular basis and get us more familiar with each of the bills and helps us understand the timing of them. Um, and that leads to my question of what is the timing on these bills? Are any of them uh, more are any of them more ripe right now than others, especially the seeker bill? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I'll take that, and then Ella jump in if you think I missed something. Thank you, Nancy. Those are good thoughts. They tend to move. There's a rhythm. Right now, we're still really in budget season. Um, and unfortunately, budget season seems to get longer every year. They always say that the budget's supposed to be done, I think, as a matter of law by April 1st, but then it drags into May. And then we always find ourselves, and the legislators find themselves in this very condensed period to try to pass hundreds and hundreds of bills. And so there's a real flurry in May and June. And that's why it becomes a lot of late nights, and then sometimes the Assembly or the Senate will extend the session because they feel like they need more time to pass bills that are priorities to them. So what typically happens is the budget negotiations are ongoing now, and the Senate has been a real leader on environmental issues. The Senate passes lots of good environmental laws, and then things really get bogged down in the Assembly, in the committees in the Assembly, and then usually it's just a mad dash in May and June. But we track all the bills. We have it's called LRS. We have a service company, and Ella every morning, first thing when she's having her breakfast, is checking what's going on with every single bill, and she gets notifications about those bills. So that's kind of the rhythm of it. And so there isn't right at this moment a lot of heat or pressure around those bills because right now people are just fighting over money. That's the number one issue. And you asked me a separate part of that question.
Secra.
Oh,
Um,
Secra. Secra, people, Secra is a really big deal for many reasons, as you know, and that the governor has made that part of the budget. The budget ultimately is a bill or a series of bills. It gets passed as legislation, and so she is dealing with that in the budget. So that language will get resolved as part of the budget. So that's more pressing. And different organizations right now are taking positions. Save the Sound will be making a statement about it. We'll be doing some sort of communications about it probably in the next 4 or 5 business days. But our legal team is looking at it, and we're looking at what the other organizations are saying about it right now.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. One other quick, silly question. Why was there fuzzy animal photos in that montage in the list?
Yes, that was Rural Resource Fair Day. That was just kind of to showcase the variety of things that could go down at the Capitol complex. But that was a day in which a lot of folks from the rural areas of New York came to showcase their offerings. And one of those was, I think, yeah, it was just a farm that just brought their tiny horse and some goats. And there was one legislator carrying around a baby goat the entire day, and she would not give it back.
Okay, you guys got to bring a horseshoe crab.
We already won the horseshoe
I
crab.
know, but just to, give some good feels to everyone.
I don't
No,
think
you're right.
horseshoe crabs are nearly as cute as tiny horses. That
I
might backfire for us, actually.
Thank you, Nancy. I see Jane Curtis' hand is up. Hi, Jane.
Hi, David. I want to echo what Nancy just said about Secra. It seems like somewhat of a sleeper issue that they perhaps want to slide through while everybody is focused on the dramatic, let me call them, pieces of legislation. FCWC is a longtime advocate for community groups that want to bring the environmental issues forward to their land use boards and their town and village trustees. So we want to intensely follow this, and we'll appreciate any information that you have as we move along.
All right, I really appreciate that. I'm not surprised that you and Nancy are very focused on that. I think everybody who is a lifelong environmental custodian or advocate here in New York State is extremely focused on this. I was telling you that I testify at the joint Senate and Assembly Environmental Conservation Budget hearing, which the advocates first they interview the DEC all day, and then the advocates get 3 minutes each to go up to the podium and talk. And that usually starts at 5 o'clock at night. This year I had the pleasure of being on the last panel, so I didn't get to speak until 10:30 at night. So I sat through the entire day of testimony and the entire evening of testimony. And I will say that 9 out of 10 advocates who got up to the podium had a view on SECRA. But what's fascinating about it is there were environmentalists who thought it was good to make it less bureaucratic and to weaken it because you could expedite, for example, renewable energy projects. And then there were obviously a lot of environmental advocates who are very troubled and concerned about weakening it. So it's going to be a hot issue. It already is a hot issue. But I assure you that we and all the other lobbyists in Albany who care about the environment are going to be working hard to try to make sure that it's robust. But we will be issuing specific comments, a statement about this next week.
Great.
Thank you.
And then I see a question in the Q&A, so I can go ahead and read that. It's do you have metrics on petitions sent to politicians from Save the Sound compared to the number of contacts on our email list per issue? And I can say Ella mentioned David Siegerman earlier in the presentation. He's the communications member of the team, and yes, we do have metrics on that. I know we use a service to get those action alerts out, and we're able to track who takes action on those. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I know David Siegerman could get them. So
Yeah,
I
so we can
can't
get
see,
back. We can
yeah,
get
I
back
can't see
to
who
whoever wants
asked.
that data. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe when we email out the recording to the participants, we can include a little data on that.
We do have a
Yeah.
very engaged list. I don't remember the numbers either, but we do. We always get
And
engaged.
and on that front, I would just say again, going back to what everyone on this webinar can do, and Spreading the word is critical. Numbers matter. The more people who know the issue, the more people who are filling out action alerts. Even if they're not members of Save the Sound, if you send, forward these things to friends and family and other people who you think might care, um, it's about getting the governor, as if we need the governor's signature, or getting a senator or whoever who's a chair of a committee who needs to move a bill. We're very strategic about when and why we do this, because we understand that there's an inflection point with a particular piece of legislation. But the more people who know about it, the better. That's always the key.
Have you specifically reached out to high schools that join the Sound on Long Island, Connecticut, and Westchester to form clubs, student chapters that would support activities, both recreational and environmental, on the Sound? In other words, try to connect the youth to what you're doing, but at the same time making them um, aware of, whether it's swim for the sound, a sailboat race, or whatever. I see a lack of outreach and a lot of newsletters, but very little feedback from youth.
Okay, well, that's a good comment. We do, um, high school kids can't vote, but but I'm being a little facetious. But of course, outreach is critical. We are always trying to work in as many communities around the Sound as we can. I speak at schools and yacht clubs and libraries and community centers all around the Sound on a regular basis, as does a very large number of our program team. And maybe you could address there's a lot of other member engagement things happening around the Sound.
Yeah, we're actually working with a school group coming up soon, doing a cleanup as a field trip, and an educational program with them. But um, we do reach out to the communities with volunteer opportunities and ways to get involved. Programs that are available to people. We participate in community events, especially coming up in April. We'll be all around the Sound at a lot of different events, celebrating Earth Month and having opportunities for people to get involved, lists of dates of volunteer opportunities, and we encourage and welcome youth to participate in those.
Uh,
We don't always reach out directly to schools, but there are some specific school programs that some of our teams do. We have Who Differ Progressive Action and Youth Advocacy Days, encouraging that next generation of environmental stewards.
We
how
also
about a
just a few,
special, how about a
I'm sorry, go
special
ahead.
newsletter just on your what you said, Ann? Put it all together with nothing else. Just your outreach to youth with your events, days, links to, they're very savvy. Give them plenty of links where to go to do this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah, we also we get some great engagement from the colleges around us too, with an office in New Haven and in Larchmont. And with programs at UConn too. We get some great college engagement. But that's a great idea, Mark. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We also just very quickly will say that we um, have engaged lots of high school students over the years in doing volunteer water monitoring here in Westchester County and in New Haven, and that's a nice way to get kids engaged. And I know that we have programs with young sailors around the Sound, educating them about water quality issues. So there are a number of programs, youth-related programs and opportunities that we do have. So it's a good comment and something that we do think about a lot. Okay, just looking for any more hands. Okay, anything in the chat that I missed?
There's
Okay.
great job as always, David and Ella.
Thanks,
So,
Anne.
and I'll
Thank
echo
you.
that.
Thank you. All right. Well, um, not seeing any other questions, I would just say thank you all very much for your time and your interest. Thank you for your questions. And, as you continue to move through this session and this spring, if you have any questions that you don't feel like you're getting from our newsletters or otherwise, you can always email or call Ella or I. And we're living and breathing this every day, so we are always happy to talk to as many people as possible about what's happening in Albany. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.